I'm so glad you're here. Well, today in this video, we're going to talk about the prophetic interpretation of Jacob working 20 years for Laban. In fact, it's going to take two videos, this one and the next one. Now, it's not real obvious, so we have to really dig for the details and pay attention in order to get the correct interpretation for Jacob working those 20 years for Laban, because it's not as easy as people think to figure it out. So in order to find out the interpretation, we needed to first read those passages looking for types and shadows and verses that revealed a pre-trib rapture of the bride. Oh, but there weren't any. So then we had to reread the passages, all those chapters in there, look for verses and types and shadows that spoke of a mid-trib rapture of the church. Oh, for goodness sakes, there was none of those either. However, we found an abundance of verses and types and shadows that show us that Jacob working for Laban for 20 years applies to the remnant. You know, that group of people that were not in belief by even mid-trib. So they missed that mid-trib rapture. And since they missed that mid-trib rapture, they find themselves in the second half of Daniel's 70th week. So now, what is fascinating about this passage is, not only was Jacob involved in a grand deception in order to acquire Esau's birthright, but the tables turned, and the same grand deception was perpetuated against Jacob when he acquired Leah and Rachel through the same type of scheme. The reason why it's so important for us to study this scene right now is because the nation of Jacob, whose name has been changed to Israel, is not only instigating a grand deception right now in our day, but the tables will turn on Jacob, and he will then be deceived by the Antichrist, and that's when he will be in really big trouble. You know that period called the time of Jacob's trouble? Yeah, what we're going to study out today is showing us what's going to happen. Now, just in case you want to know what one of the big deceptions that the nation of Jacob is instigating right now, you're going to have to do your own very thorough research into what's called the India-Middle East corridor. That will explain to you why the ruler of that nation told his military to stand down on October 7th. And when you're doing your research, I want you to notice where that corridor passes through Jacob's nation. Now, for the sake of our busy young moms, those of you, when you do your research and you discover that and you find out where that corridor is going to pass through the nation of Jacob, then go ahead and type that into the comment section. And I'm being very, I'm hoping to be clever here because I don't want to put our channel at risk. So I'm having to kind of switch names here because this is a very big deception that's going on right now. Okay, now moving on to today's lesson. First, we're going to talk about Jacob's two wives. They are a very important part of Israel's history. So important, in fact, that there is a prophecy about Rachel and Leah that was given to Boaz, of all people. The prophecy was given to Boaz when he acquired Ruth and her mother-in-law, Naomi. Boaz acquired two women in his transaction. Interesting. Well, that's an important detail because today we're talking about two women. However, it's Rachel and Leah who belong to Jacob. But now let's take a look at that important prophecy that was spoken over Boaz, who was their kinsman redeemer. Ruth chapter 4, verse 11. All the people who were in the court and the elders said to Boaz, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built the house of Israel. And may you achieve wealth in Ephrathah and become famous in Bethlehem." Now, those of you who have studied your Old Testament and who have a solid grasp on Israel's history, you know that Rachel and Leah are a type of Israel. They are not the Gentile bride that a few people like to teach. There is nothing about Rachel and Leah that communicate the pre-trib rapture of the Gentile bride. If you have read Genesis chapter 29, you notice that Jacob fell in love with Rachel at her father's well, Laban's well. Jacob and Laban made a contract that Jacob would work for Laban for 7 years to acquire Rachel as his wife. However, Leah, Rachel, Laban, and the men of that area were in on a deception to give Leah to Jacob instead of Rachel. Well, as you know, Jacob had to work for Laban another 7 years to secure Rachel. Did Rachel actually love Jacob? Well, she was willing to sell a sleepover with him for some mandrakes that Leah's son had found. This is very telling. Since Leah conceived that very night, perhaps that could have been Rachel who conceived that night. Yeah, but she traded that night away. So you could say Rachel sold something of value, just like Esau sold something of value, his birthright. Well, apparently Rachel wanted some mandrake stew that night instead of Jacob. Here's how the conversation went between Leah and Rachel. Look at Genesis chapter 30, verses 15 through 17, New American Standard Bible. But she, Leah, said to her, "Is it a small matter for you to take my husband? And would you take my son's mandrakes also?" So Rachel said, "Therefore he may lie with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came in from the field in the evening, then Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he lay with her that night. God gave heed to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a 5th son. So now, let's talk about those mandrakes, since they were brought up in this narrative, and details are incredibly important. And I was so grateful for Angeline. She found a lot of information about mandrakes. It's called the enchanter's nightshade. It's an herb of the nightshade family. It has large ovate leaves with a large forked root resembling human form, and formally credited with magical properties. It's also called the May apple or the devil's apples. The Latin word is mandragoras, but they're called mandrakes or mandragon because of its suggested magical powers. Yeah, it was thought to have magical powers. It was a narcotic that was prepared from the root. So now we need to ask, was it that herb that helped Leah conceive so prolifically? Did she conceive by enchantments? Is that why Rachel was so desperate to get her hands on some? So desperate that she would trade a sleepover with Jacob? Well, we have to ask these questions, right? All right, so now let's take a look at these two women. They were both deceptive. They were both on narcotics. They were both jealous of each other. They were both married to Jacob. They both birthed sons to Jacob. They both gave their handmaids to Jacob. The only differences are Leah wasn't as beautiful, and Jacob loved Rachel more. It's looking more and more like these two sisters are actually one and the same person, and that we need to layer their 2 sets of 7 years that Jacob worked for each one of them on top of each other, not string them from end to end so that it equals 14 years. I'm speaking prophetically on God's timeline. So we need to look at them as a 7-year period on God's timeline. Now, We know by the prophecies spoken over Boaz that they represent one nation. They gave birth to the 12 tribes of Israel, to whom the law was given, and the Jewish Messiah was born. In fact, think about this. Jacob and his mother Rebekah, who was Laban's sister, deceived Jacob's father Isaac. So, how ironic that Leah, Rachel, and their father Laban deceived Jacob the very same way that Jacob deceived Isaac. The only innocent victim in this thread is Isaac. The 12 tribes, think about this, they had deceivers on their mom's side and their dad's side of the family. It's apparent that Jacob, Leah, and Rachel are a perfect match for each other. This is why we can say that prophetically speaking, the 2 sets of 7 years that Jacob worked for Leah and Rachel are layered on top of each other, equaling 7 years on God's timeline, not 14. Now, when a man and woman marry, the Bible says they become one flesh. Well, we see in Genesis chapter 31, when Jacob is getting ready to leave Laban to go back to his father's land in Canaan, the scriptures connect Jacob, Rachel, and Leah together as one, as the nation of Israel. Read Genesis 31:4. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to his flock in the field. See, they're counted as one in the field. So now it was Kareem here on our team who figured out that Laban represents the world system. Yeah, that whole family has had to deal with Laban, even as far back as when Abraham's servant went to Paddan Aram to secure a bride for Isaac, who was Rebekah. She was Laban's sister. She took some of that worldliness into her own household when she gave instructions to Jacob on how to deceive his father and his brother Esau and get Esau's blessing and birthright. So now we're going to continue this study in the next video, and you will not want to miss it. We've got some amazing things to show you from these couple of chapters in the Bible, and you're going to love it. And you're going to be so grateful if you are the one who is hoping to be the bride and preparing herself to be the bride. You're going to be so grateful you have this information and this correct Bible prophecy interpretation. Okay, I will talk to you later. Bye! Ephrathah. Ephrathah. E-P-H-R-A-T-H-A-A. Ephrathah. Okay, I'm ready.